Welcome to Landmark Talks Property, a podcast by Landmark Information Group that covers all things property in short and intelligent podcasts.
Welcome to this episode of Landmark Talks Property. I'm Steve Sanashi, joined by
Simon Burley, Sales Director at Landmark Estate Agent Services.
Cool. And today we're going to talk about compliance, but reframing it as a business enabler. And by doing so, here we've got a service that's working really well with agents, allowing them to monetize their compliance obligations and their duties. And for many, this is music to their ears in an area that's been present for some time and has been a bit of a business restrictor, but done in the right way, this can open new doors for your agency. So Simon, let's start at the very top. Should agents be charging for their compliance services?
It's a good question, and the fact of the matter is that running a good compliance service in an estate agency does come at a cost. Now, whether you're doing it electronically, whether you're doing it manually, it's a time cost for sure. If you look at risk assessments, individual risk assessments, business risk assessments, policies, procedures, time taken, reviewing of cases. So whether agents should or shouldn't is an individual choice. What we are finding is that the market is moving in that direction, however. I believe the stats we were looking at earlier, Steve, was certainly from what we see, about 20% of the market are charging at the moment, something around there. Certainly our client base, about 20-ish% of our client base are charging. But what we have found is that probably our service that is growing the most. So whether you charge or you don't charge, it's down to an individual decision. We're finding more people becoming more comfortable with it because they're seeing their peers doing it in the area. But ultimately, with all the restrictions, with all the red tape, with the rising cost of everything from petrol to going out to a viewing, to energy, to increases in minimum wage, taxes from the government, people are wanting to now really drive that monetization of the transaction. And that's certainly becoming more of a kind of hot topic. So it's up to you whether you charge or not. We're not here to tell you whether you should, but the market direction is certainly moving in that way.
I think there's been a risk of maybe fee fatigue where moving house is stereotypically very costly. There's an expense at many stages. And this is a way of bringing in a charge at the earlier stage. And we know we've got the home buying reforms that are being lined up, so we'll have more commitment, hopefully, once those kind of new guidance are
because they're talking about reservation agreements in some form.
Exactly, because it's too easy to walk away at the moment. But in the meantime, we're finding of those 20% that are using this as a service, it's securing that commitment much sooner, and it's helping them both from a buyer side and a seller side as well. So this fee fatigue of it's costly, as long as you're not outrageous with the pricing, it's landing well and it's working as an add-on for our clients so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's how much work will you do as an agent for potentially no money? Because we know what the fall-through rates are like. We know what the cost of putting an individual in an office, of opening the doors of the office are. But you need to do work as a business. You need to employ systems, spend your time as a business owner in areas that are not, viewing, valuing, bringing properties to the market. So you need to start chipping away at those costs. So there is fee fatigue, I see what you mean, but actually what a number of our agents are doing is they're using it as a way to gain commitment up front. And to have some of those slightly awkward conversations potentially, although they seem to be framing it in a really easy manner that people understand, to get that money out of someone, and it secures that sale a little bit more, for want of a better phrase. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it has always been, certainly up to kind of 18, 24 months ago, it's always been a cost that agents have absorbed. Going back further, probably a heavily manual element to it as well. So since this has been the legislation, there's been a time cost for certain, but now a commercial cost as well when you're using electronic services to verify the identity of your clients, which makes a lot of sense. Criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated now, so you need those robust systems in place. But are we at a point now where agents are starting to think, I can't absorb this, or I don't want to absorb this for much longer. We've done that for so long. And there is a window of opportunity to transition across. So we've got the kind of 20% marker now. What do you think will happen over the next 2 years, per se?
I think the best way to answer that, I think the short answer to that is I think there'll be more adoption. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think if you look at it in the context of where we've been, so I've been at Landmark Estate Agent Services now for nearly 9 years. Yeah, and when I joined, we were speaking to agents about running anti-money laundering checks that cost money. Yeah, and bearing in mind, if you go back 15, 20 years, these weren't really a thing that you guys had to deal with. But, it's a part of the world now. HMRC manage that process and manage it with an iron fist sometimes. So people are more aware of what they need to do around that. If I go back 9 years, we were talking to a lot of agents who were just happy doing it manually. It wasn't a major issue. They didn't really see that there was a major problem with what they were doing. And we were bringing people on to do what we call a standard AML check, just a kind of in-house, on the desktop, quick check of Stephen Shanachey, where he lives, is he who he says he is. So there was an adoption to that electronic process, which came at a cost, and that was a big barrier for some agents, but that also came with a speed and time-saving element. Then if you move to 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, there was more of a transition from what we call the standard AML to a kind of facial recognition, where people were sending out a link, doing a photo, you're holding it to their passport. Again, that came at a higher cost. But people have seen that now as the kind of gold standard of that electronic journey. And they've moved to that. And then you come forward to today. So you've had that adoption from paper-based to standard to facial recognition. People are now wrapping that facial recognition element around charging for it because they can see the cost that's at their business. So I think you've seen an adoption in this space about how you go from no one doing anything to everyone now moving to a electronic journey and to a charging journey. And it's a cost that businesses realise that absorbing is something they can do. It's whether they want to or not, and actually whether they feel that it's now an acceptable part of what they do to charge. And more and more are, for sure.
Yeah. I think the environment's changed, the culture maybe. HIPS probably started that, going back early kind of 2000s, 2007 time. That set a precedent where, well, hang on, we can charge for things up front. We've got the traditional no sell, no fee model, which has its ups and downs, pros and cons, but this enabled agents to get that commitment early, and also with HIPS, we saw it firsthand, monetize from it as well. So that has evolved in prior years as well. We've got floor plans now, which outsourcing them, for example, was a luxury before, going back 10, 12 years ago. That's now shifted, and there is this charging model as well. So I do think there's some real momentum here where, as long as you're not being outrageous, you've got a fair pricing model that's reasonable and you can explain and justify. I think this is the direction that we are seeing. And I would say it's way beyond the compliance kind of AML part. There's much more to it. If we look at compliance as a package, there's so much. We were with Stephen Day recently, and he was explaining to us how, just exactly what's required on the agent. And we're aware of this, but hearing it again and reinforcing it is a big deal. And this is a lot of pressure and strain that agents have to take on board and have to comply with. So that those things, do you want to just talk us through those extras? We've got the digital, the electronic AML check, one thing, and everything else that comes with it for an agent to make their business compliant and protect their clients. Yeah,
and just to go back on that point as well, you've got people bringing in reservation agreements and charging up front for them, floor plans, EPCs, photos. So this is not a new thing. These are services that agents have to deliver, or don't have to deliver in reservation agreements, but are starting to deliver at a cost. But the way I've always framed it is that when you look at compliance as a subject as some people think it is, I think it's fantastic. But it's not just, as you said, an AML check. If it was just an AML check, frankly, HMRC wouldn't be so active in the marketplace with estate agents. I'm not here to scaremonger it, that's just a fact. It's everything else. And when someone comes in to inspect your business from an anti-money laundering point of view and your policies and procedures, they're not just saying, right, show me the check you've done on Stephen Shanachey. Have you done a facial recognition? Have you done a standard? Have you done it manually? They don't do that. They go, right, give me the file. And I want to open that file and I want to read a story about the house you bought on. about the individual who's selling that property, about the factors around that property, about the individuals that are coming in to purchase that property. I want to know about them. I want to know how they're funding it. I want to know, do they own the property to sell it in the first place? So you've got all these things, but when you break that down, that goes way beyond just running an AML check on someone. So registrations, you have to register with HMRC on a yearly basis.
That's the most common reason for a fine, by the way.
Yeah,
so
sort of 90, in the last tranche of fines that were published, I think at 93% were for lack of registration. Now, HMRC know who those businesses are. You should be, if you are registered for VAT, you should be on their books. They should know what you're doing, and you have to register as an EAB, an estate agent business. So they know who you are, and if you don't register, frankly, they'll come knocking on your door. So you have to register, and you have to renew as well. You will get sent, I think, 2 renewals or 2 renewal reminders by HMRC. A number of our clients have fallen foul of that because they've gone to someone who's no longer in the business anymore. So, by trying to do the right thing and maybe just missing an email, and you only get 2, you could get fined there. So that takes your time.
And that's a cost.
Yeah.
I mean, off the bat, annually, there's your first cost that you're absorbing.
Yeah.
So, this starts to set the tone. But
Absolutely. Then you've got the other elements around that. So you've got to then get your paperwork in order. You've got, as we touched on earlier, you've got your AML policy. And now one of the first questions I ask any of my clients is, have you registered? What's your policy? What's your risk assessments? What's your business risk assessment? And what are your individual risk assessment? So there's all these paperwork elements you have to have in place, and they have to reflect your business personally. You can't just grab them off the shelf. There'll be people that will be able to give you them off the shelf, but you've got to spend the time filling it in, getting it specific to your business. And that's a business risk assessment. You've then got the company AML policy, which should outline how you run your AML procedures with individuals in enhanced due diligence cases, simplified and standard due diligence cases. So then you've got your individual risk assessments, where you have to look at, here's Stephen Sanchez, he's walked into the office. Is there anything unusual about the transaction? Is he a UK resident? Is he a politically exposed person? Is the transaction, in the case of Stephen, unusually large or not in keeping with his circumstances? And the list goes on. Then you've got training, so staff training, individual training. Then you've got to audit your business, potentially, in terms of what you're doing. So, broken down, these can sound horrendous, but they should make up part of your sort of yearly process as a business owner.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of time, often spent, will really help you sort of with that. And there's companies out there that can help you and support you with that. I mean, Landmark are one of them, but we're not here to talk about us. But that's where it goes on. And then you've got the AML element. So that comes at an actual physical cost if you're doing it or outsourcing it or passing it onto a third party. And that's where we're finding that people are sort of realising that, enough's enough.
Yeah.
And we're moving into that space that I talked about earlier, from that electronic or manual to electronic world to electronic and chargeable world.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that's really where we're moving to.
I think you've explained it really well. And if you were approached by a buyer, a vendor, you're the agent, of course, they're disgruntled, they're not happy. They've got an invitation to carry out a facial recognition check, and now they've got let's say it's a £35 charge that they've been asked to fulfill. They're responding to that request for that one digital check. And what you've shared there is a real insight to everything else that's under the surface. And most of it is time cost. Some of it is financial cost. Add it together. This is why some agents have compliance departments. There's teams. These bigger agents have people whose role is to ensure the business complies, because there's so much to take care of. So I think in those cases where there is a question mark, there is a query around, why am I being charged for this? This is just standard par for the course. You should be absorbing this. But actually, Mr. or Mrs. Vendor, there's a whole host of reasons and fulfillments that we have to meet to comply. Worst case, you could direct them to the regs themselves. Go and Google the money laundering supervision, and I'll be close to 100 pages there of this is what we're working with. So this isn't just one and done invitation for a facial rec check. This is we live and breathe much more, and the pressure is on the agent to get it right, because they're the ones that are liable should anything go wrong.
It is, and I would probably rewind that a little bit and say that our clients or our agents don't tend to get to that point of it being a something that's seen as an issue. Because if with anything, if you address it at an earlier point, you use it as part of your pitch, the process goes smoothly. And it's about turning around and saying, right, we take compliance seriously in our business. You want to give us your property to sell, fine. Well, first of all, we need to know that you are who you say you are, and there's a lot of checks we need to do on you and the property to make sure that we're bringing this to market in the right way. And then when your purchasers come along, do you know what? We'll also be charging them to make sure that they are who they say they are, that their money's in the right place, that they've got the source of funds. We can prove all that, and that hopefully that will drive down any issues we find out further down the line. And I know a lot of our businesses who are doing this frame it in such a way. It's not a massive part of the conversation, but they frame it as a positive. And we've seen since we launched the ability to charge on our platform, it's probably about 2 years ago now, isn't it? That agents are just sort of running with it. At the beginning, there was a bit of hesitancy, a bit of should we, shouldn't we, a bit of how do we frame it. Now they're just running with it, and they're realising that actually being upfront, being honest, is the way forward with what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. We are scrutinising, we're verifying the other party. As soon as we connect them together, it's our responsibility to make sure we understand who they are, where the funds are coming from, and that your transaction is safe.
Yeah, and if you look at, part of a standard transaction, when you bring on a property, you really should be running a land registry. You need to work out who owns the property.
Yeah, that's another cost.
They used to be £3, it's now £7.
Yeah.
If you're running a title and a plan, that's 14 quid. If you're chucking in a couple of AMLs in there, you're up to 20. I don't even know what other systems charge, but you're layering on that cost. And all of this is there designed to help individuals, to help stop criminality, but to also just make sure that the transaction starts on the right footing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw a case recently where an agent had requested identity documentation, and I'm just going to start that bit again, sorry.
Steve.
I know.
Fuck's sake.
Okay.
Start swearing.
We saw a case recently where an agent had received a driving license that was clearly AI produced. So they'd emailed that across as their proof, their documents, and so blatant. So it's a suspicious activity report off the bat. So this shows the importance of having tight AML, tight compliance processes, but that digital element to support with the verification as well. So AI is never going to be worse than it is today. So these images that might come through in years to come are going to get better and better. So agents need the right systems in place to fend off that risk, that challenge.
And that system comes with a human element as well. You're not going to be able to necessarily spot a fake driving license.
No, they're going to get better.
We are not trained on that. Equally, you do not need to be putting on your trench coat and your hat and sneaking down the road after someone with a newspaper with holes in it for eyes. But what you do need to do is you do need to look at each case. You need to scrutinise it a little bit, and you need to use your sort of intuition around that. In that case, did the person present with something that was a bit unusual?
Yeah.
And if they didn't, and then you see that clearly AI driving licence, the system's picking that up, and you're looking at it, and then it's upon you to act. And we go back to that time spent doing the right things comes at a cost.
Absolutely. Well, that client contacted us and became a client as a result of that. So they were manually verifying before, and they've now tightened things up as well. So we've covered some of the background here and justifying the work and the cost that goes in. So I'm pretty confident using that, agents can have conversations about the work if they're challenged. It doesn't happen often at all, to be fair, in this line of product, but there is a lot of depth to it. So we've covered that side. Let's look at the commercials. So how does that look in terms of charging? And I appreciate this is going to vary by geography, by agent type, and typically though, give a bit of a flavour. What do the costings look like for the agent?
They do vary, and it's not that a typical argument we speak to clients. Everyone in London charges more than everyone in Newcastle. That does not stack up with what we see across the board. What we see is agents, in some cases, charging as low as £10 and actually not even covering their costs. Yeah. Now that's because that's the level they want to charge at, and that's absolutely upon them. We don't set a figure. We allow you as an agent to put the figure on there that you think's you think it's good enough. I mean, if you're going to do it, I think you probably need to cover your costs, and there's a simple calculation we can help with. We have some agents charging up to 70, 80, 90, £100. Again, that's up to them. But the average is been really consistent from day one, actually. It's around about the £33 to £35 mark when you average it out. Obviously, that means there's a few higher and a few lower. But it's that sort of value that agents, and I say consistently, for the last 2 years, that's pretty much been the sort of average price that we see. And that's how, including VAT, because your client's paying VAT as well, and we're then giving that back to you plus VAT as well. So that's the kind of the price range, and I don't think that's unreasonable. It's covering the cost of services, it's covering the cost of product. There's a bit of time cost in there as well. The beauty here is that we do all the back end work for you and just deliver the money back into your account on a monthly basis. So we take the work away from you guys and we just deliver you the money. So you're covering the cost of the products you're ordering on Landmark Agent or on our system, and then you're layering on money to recover that cost and layer on a bit of extra.
So the agent's in
revenue as well.
They're in complete control.
Yeah,
they specify what they want that
Everything
to be.
we do on our system puts people in control. No contract, no setup fee, no ongoing fee, no license fee. It's all about you and how you want to run the system for the betterment of you and your business.
Yeah, okay. You used the word reasonable earlier, so it's finding that balance, what you think is a reasonable price to bring.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
And I think from the buyer side especially, we're seeing when agents start to dabble with this and experiment, is this something that I can implement across the board? They'll trial it, and some will opt to start with the buyer side first before they bring in their sellers as well. Quite good, I think. It's a psychological commitment there. As soon as they've paid money, there's an indicator there that they are serious. They're not a tire kicker. That they are ready to progress. And
we get a lot of agents starting going, I don't want to jeopardise an instruction. So I'll start with the buyers. But what we find very quickly is that
they soon learn that
logic changes when they understand how it works and how it's received. And it feels completely natural for some agents to do that. And what we've started to see is those people with sort of the lower charging models come back and just increase a little bit because now they're comfortable. And it's not just about us having a conversation with the business owner and them saying, I want to do this, that's great. It's about the business owner relaying it to their team. And their team being comfortable with it, and that's where Steve's customer success team step in and can support those kind of initial, the launch of it and those initial conversations.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to implement and trial, monitor. Another I've seen some of our clients doing is for the sellers, they will initiate their own refund upon completion. So again, it's just that getting that commitment from their side, but also with the promise that, okay, well, that's fine, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I will refund you in full at that point.
But of the 30% typically that fall through, they're keeping the money. You've had to do the work up front.
Yes, it's true.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So we've covered the background, the depth, the meaning of this, the benefits of this as well. If you were speaking to an agent thinking about incorporating charging for their compliance, for their business, they're on the fence, they're not quite sure yet, what would you advise? What would you suggest?
I would suggest look, it comes down to whether you want to do it or not, whether you feel comfortable doing it or not. And as we've said, more and more people are feeling comfortable charging. One of the things that has happened is people are seeing other agents in their area and hearing the fact that they're charging. And the argument was probably 2 years ago, that would affect them winning instructions. Now, you can obviously go on Rightmove, you can go on 20CI, you can go on all these systems and you can see exactly how many instructions your competitors have made. And it probably hasn't had a great deal of impact at all, if any. So, you have to look at your tolerance. Most people are coming around to the fact that they're happy to charge. So it's whether you just go, right, well, that's the market rate in my area. Or if you're starting that kind of trend in your area, maybe you start lower and you just get comfortable with it. So I think it's have a chat with your team, but actually look at your books. The cold hard fact of cost. Is there a way in your business if you can recoup the cost? You wouldn't be paying for professional photography on a 2 up, 2 down for 150 grand. Someone else will be paying for that. Otherwise, you're eating into your margin at every single turn. So consider what it is, consider what's a reasonable fee, consider what the market rates are, speak to other agents, speak to us if you want to, and we can give you an idea. What we don't do on our system is demand or mandate that you have to do it on every single individual. No. It is there as an option to do, in the way that the land registry isn't a mandated part of the process, but it's the absolute best way to do it in order to identify who owns the property. Third-party payment, clearly it's not mandated or charging for AMLs, but it's there as an option on the system. So get used to it, trial it, see if it works for you. That would be my suggestion.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you, Simon. And
pleasure.
We have the luxury of getting to speak to lots of agents, and the best success stories we hear is where agents have made themselves more profitable by process change. They're working with the same number of listings, but they've enabled themselves to earn more money by improving things and adding new things in with the workload and the pipeline that they have already. So we believe that this is an area to consider, something to think about, whether you should be bringing compliance in for compliance charging in for your business. And we can see the way the market's moving. So there is an upward trend here, and certainly worth some consideration if you think it could work for your business today. So thank you for watching this edition of Landmark Talks Property. I'm Steve Sandersheep, and this is Simon Burley. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Landmark Talks Property. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please hit subscribe. This podcast is for general purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice.